Hello, my name is Gary Gomes. It's nice to be with everyone again. I'm here to talk with you about Vedic astrology and its implications for the world, also to review some of my current predictions, and also to give you some predictions for the world and how Hindu astrology or Vedic astrology will affect you, and also whether or not it's going to be a good month or a bad month for free people. I do this show every week. It's a little bit late getting out because I have some personal issues to deal with, which are not they're serious, but um, not not horrible. Okay, let me just put it that way. And and nobody's in any danger or nobody's in any trouble. Okay, so just to let you know that. The All right, so I just want to give you a little bit about my background before I ramble on. I've been a Vedic astrologer for some 30 plus years, and I've been also I'm the vice president and president emeritus of the Council of Vedic Astrology, um, first vice president and the second president of the Council of Vedic Astrology, which is now run by Dennis Flaherty, who was the first president. And essentially, the um, I I'm also a Reiki master. I've also written in publications like Mountain Astrologer and given lectures in various parts of the world, in India, excuse me, through teleconferencing in India and through conferences around the United States, England, and also in Turkey. Um, and I've been around the field for a long time. Uh, and I, I also study tarot. I also study Western astrology, but I have a particular love for Indian astrology, or Vedic astrology, as it's called in the United States. Um, I wanted to start this week with, this is going to be a special week. Oh, before I go on, I just want to remind you to subscribe. Uh, I'm trying to figure out a way to pizzazz up these shows with like some special effects and stuff like that, but I'm kind of limited for the next couple of months in terms of what I can do. And I know that couple of months has been going on for around 4 or 5 months, but things that I had expected to occur by now have not occurred as expected, and that's one of the delays I'm involved in. So it's just a matter of moving into a new facility and getting um, certain aspects of my life more solid. But I'll continue to do these broadcasts or more stable, more stationary. So I'm in a temporary situation right now, and I need to get back into a permanent situation before I can set up studio space and stuff like that. So that's my long way of saying that I'm not in transit, but like I said, this isn't my permanent location. I'm also going to be starting a video channel before the summer's out, connected with music, and also a video channel connected with other things. I haven't determined which other things quite yet. The other thing is, we are working on a book. I'm working on a book with one of my students, and also trying out some new things in Vedic astrology, some new areas which I'll share with you over the next few months, and also digging into a lot of the old tomes again. So every once in a while, it does an astrologer good to look back at the classical texts and see what they say. So without further ado, let me go forward and start talking about the charts, because we have a couple of charts to look at today. And I want to wish everybody Happy New Year. It's technically the real Hindu New Year comes every year around this time during the new moon in Pisces. And I'm going to show you the chart for that new moon. And it's also considered to be a kind of an auspicious year, according to a colleague of mine, Juliana. Swanson, and then it's considered to be an auspicious year. So the last time we had a year like this, and again, I have to recognize my colleague Barry Rosen for mentioning this. The last time we had a year like this, so there's a 60-year cycle of years in Indian astrology, and this is supposed to be an auspicious year, a good year. I look back at 1962 was the last time we had this year, and in all honesty, there were a lot of horrible things happening that year. So I think overall, it's what is considered the first in a 6-year cycle, and the really horrible year is supposed to be 2 years from now, which is why I think a lot of astrologers are saying they're expecting war within 2 years. And I don't think that's necessarily true. We actually got involved in the Vietnam War in 1962, which was, essentially this year. But it didn't escalate until 65 or 66. So if you want to use that as your war touch point, then that makes a certain amount of sense. But I'm not seeing anything really like Vietnam on the horizon. I'm not seeing anything in which there's going to be a major loss of lives in the United States. Again, we are going to see, like the 60s, a lot of social unrest, a lot of, I don't want to use the word lawlessness, but a lot of essentially people trying to make social reform. And again, we'll probably see riots in a couple of years, or something similar to the riots of the 60s in a couple of years. So, and we're going to see a lot of rebellions of countries around the world. That doesn't mean we're going that the center won't hold. I'm old enough to remember what the late 60s felt like, and the late 60s felt like to a lot of people who were older than me, felt like things were falling apart. I looked at the environment and I didn't see things falling apart. I just saw things sort of like shifting or changing around a little bit. But for people who were established, it looked like things were falling apart. And they sort of snapped back into place. And I'm expecting similar things to happen in the United States and around the world. But again, there are time segments. And again, auspicious years you have to take with a certain grain of salt. Because you have to look at the planetary placements, where they are, and what they're doing, as well as just the overall auspiciousness of the year. It's a little bit more than that. It's a little bit more than whether or not the year is a good foundation year. So keep in mind, these things roughly coincide with cycles of Saturn, which and Saturn's essentially a foundational planet. That may be why it's considered to be a good year. But also a lot of foundations get shaken up during Saturn years. So we're going to be under the influence of Saturn for most of 2022 and a little bit into 2023. As a matter of fact, all through 2023 into 2024, because essentially Saturn's going to be into 2025, excuse me. Saturn's going to be in its own sign for the next 3 years, and that usually indicates some level of hardship. But I also remember the 1960s United States, and the country was operating under a different major planetary period then. The planets were different in other regards, but I I never viewed that particular era. It was an era in which common assumptions about life changed. That much is true. There were certain things happening all around the world where common assumptions about life change. So that's the foundational aspect of it. So it can produce some good things. It can produce some upsetting things, and you have to be prepared for both of those. So it's not really so a lot. A lot of adverse planetary combinations can produce some very difficult things, like the COVID situation we encountered a couple of years ago, and which still persists. But also, it can produce opportunities for growth and opportunities for expansion and opportunities for change. So new ways of approaching life. So I think one of the things that I like to encourage people to do is look at the world through hope rather than fear, because fear essentially means you're afraid to do anything. You're afraid to take chances. And I can tell you, in the environment of the next several years, people who take chances, who are willing to change, will be favored. It's not that you'll be forced into doing it, but there'll be a general moderating of opinion, even as sides tend to collide more. So friction creates heat, creates fire, creates change, but it also creates gems. Okay, so you need friction to sharpen a knife. You need friction to cut a diamond. So these things aren't necessarily, they may seem unpleasant in the short run, but they're usually not unpleasant in the long run. Okay, so I'm just encouraging people to maintain that perspective. Please remember to subscribe, like the channel. Subscriptions are important to me, obviously, because I want to expand this, and I have the Aurora Borealis in the background. It was interesting. I chose this particular screen, kind of just changed the screensaver last week because we had a lot of extra solar activity, and I think one of the things that happens is when you have an environment like the one we're in right now, where we have this Mars-Saturn collision, or not collision, but this Mars-Saturn conjunction coming up. And for some people, it'll feel like a collision, definitely. It'll be a time to reflect on what's going on, and also to keep our tempers. All right, so this is the, I'm going to stop this because I don't trust this share option. Okay, and I'm going to try one more time. Stopping the share. And again, this is my paranoia because the share option doesn't always work. All right, so it seems to be working now. There's no way I can tell until I actually go to review it. But this is the chart for the Amavasya moon on the New Year chart. Now, as Dr. K.S. Chirac pointed out, this started on Thursday because Indian astrology tends to view the days of the week starting in the morning as opposed to the evening. So this actually started April 1st. Actually, the start of it was around 12:22 in the evening. And so we have Saturn, Mars in the second house, so everybody's angry. We kind of know that. Everybody's a little bit afraid or a little bit upset. Saturn is aspecting the moon. But the nice thing about, so Saturn's aspecting the moon, so it'll be a time to become famous. If you want to become famous, this is your time to do it. So this is the year you should put a lot of attention, especially if you're Sagittarius or Gemini or Virgo or or Pisces. Okay, it's a time to focus on fame because the Saturn Moon aspect does bring fame. The Saturn Sun aspect brings responsibility, so there won't be any fame without any responsibility. Also, if we're looking, this gives us a Sagittarius rising. It's the same rising sign as the United States. And I'm taking this really from a point at which in New Bedford, Mass, the sun and the moon are at exactly the same degree if you look up here. Okay, so that's not the traditional way of setting up a night. Amavasya, but it's the one that made most sense to me. And basically, one of the nice things about this chart is we have Jupiter and Venus in the third house, so that'll make transitions and especially acquisition of knowledge much easier. It's also aspecting the ninth house. There'll be some good judgment on the part of people of individuals in political positions, so that's good. The other thing is, so I have read some different reports on charts, and some of the chart information other people have is different from what I have. If we're focusing on the Soviet Union or the former Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, excuse me, old habits die hard. The Russian Federation. One noted astrologer has said that we have this Mars-Saturn conjunction, or the Sun, or one of the conjunctions in the eighth house. I think it was the Sun-Moon-Mercury conjunction was in the eighth house. And that's not the chart I have for the Russian Federation. I have a Russian Federation chart as being Scorpio rising. So I can't really judge that. We will have a breakthrough in the war or slowing down of the war within about a week and a half. And that's mainly because of Saturn defeating Mars in planetary war. But I don't think we're going to hit a real resolution really for another few weeks, and it may actually revert to an armed conflict again in June, I think. And it's mainly because of this particular combination right here, and Mars staying in the sign for a little while and then entering this sign, but Saturn also moving back into this sign in June. So we're going to look at the chart for this week, but I just want to look at the year chart for this year. So communications will be scattered. Okay, so essentially, what you're going to see, I think, by and large, is government communications being incredibly scrambled, not just in the United States, but all around the world. And the reason I'm saying this is because we have a debilitated Mercury. Let's see what it's doing in the other chart, in the Navamsha chart. Yeah, so Mercury's debilitation is not really canceled. It's in full swing. It's not a good time for communications. Essentially, whenever you have a combination like that, the sun and the moon together, governments or rulers will be putting out really confused messages. We've seen that already in the United States. That's in, regardless of who is president, this would be going on. And you also have kind of a belligerent attitude on the part of almost everybody. I'm hoping that'll cool down within about 2 to 3 weeks, and people will start to be a little bit more amicable or a little bit more friendly with each other. That's the idea. Around early May, we have an eclipse in this sign. Actually, an eclipse over here. And also, you'll have a conjunction of Jupiter and Venus in Pisces, which is a very nice conjunction. So I'm looking forward to that as essentially kind of a breakthrough for progress. We will have a Sun Rahu conjunction, though, coming up in early around April 15th. That'll give a lot of government scandal, not necessarily just in the United States, but also around the world. And this includes people who were in power and are currently in power. So it's not limited to one party or one individual. It's essentially a lot of people just sort of like sneaking up and and besmirching people's characters just in general. Some of it will be justified, some of it won't be justified. And that's just the way that these kinds of things work. But with this combination, you have the eighth house ruler in the fourth house, which is the seat of power, and the 10th and the ninth house ruler in the fourth house, which is the seat of power. That to me implies we're going to see quite a few political changes in the upcoming year, especially around between June and September. So you'll see people either being thrown out of office or switches in expectations or switches in government. And the people are not happy right now from this combination. They're sad, they're a little bit disturbed. I'm not saying people in particular, but basically populations are not happy. And a lot of this has to do with deprivation, inflation. So people are trying to do the right thing with the Jupiter-Venus conjunction in the third house in Aquarius. They're trying to be philosophical about it. I think when Jupiter hits Pisces, people will be a little bit more optimistic about it, but Jupiter will still be aspected by Saturn after June. I don't think that's really going to improve things a whole heck of a lot. So there's going to be a long adaptive period between now and the end of the year. And if we're looking at this chart in particular, the Lord of the 10th house is debilitated in the fourth house. Governments won't have much impact. They won't have much credibility. The other thing that I'm looking at is overall social structures will change a lot over the next year, and there'll be a strong desire for peace. And I won't necessarily say love, but peace. And people who can promise peace will essentially get into office, or people who can guarantee peace will essentially get into office. In terms of the economy, the second house, that Saturn-Mars conjunction, is still not good for economic development. So we're going to be kind of stuck in this, and this K2 in the 11th house gains will be stolen, essentially. Also, you really can't trust your friends this year. I know that's a really global statement, but I would keep my friends as friends, but I would also be critical of them and be careful of them, be cautious of them. So I'm not encouraging people to be paranoid. I'm just encouraging people to be a little bit careful about who they trust. So but overall, this actually isn't a bad chart. It is what's called the Kala Sarpa Yoga. All the planets are heading towards Rahu. So this will be another panicky kind of a year for people. We may see COVID come back or make a brief appearance during the summertime. And that's not something I'm hoping to see, but that looks likely, at least from the chart, at least on the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in the chart. So, or a little bit towards the fall. But I'm thinking overall that, we've probably seen the worst of the COVID pandemic. And there'll be a lot of, I'm not seeing another disease issue come up for quite a while. But again, international disruption, yeah, most definitely. Like I said, I think We're starting to see signs. As a matter of fact, as I predicted a couple of weeks, maybe about a month ago, we have um, a lot of just trying to look over here. We've had a lot of activity in Pakistan, and I was just reading it last night. I said, "Oh, Pakistan it looks interesting because China's even looking at Pakistan and giving it." But if I were to look at crisis points for the next year, especially crises in terms of government, I look towards the West Coast, up towards Washington State and Oregon. I also look for crises in Texas and through the Midwest, North and South Dakota, all the way from North and South Dakota, and down to Mexico, and also a lot of crises in Brazil, Argentina, and Chile, but these are mostly economic crises. In terms of government scandals, we're looking really at England and Ireland and Spain, Portugal, Libya, and economic problems in Turkey, especially Eastern Turkey, and potentially some earthquakes in Eastern Turkey or some military conflicts in Eastern Turkey and Saudi Arabia. And again, we have these lines over close to Ukraine, so that's not good. That indicates that I think the war will go on. I'm hoping I'm wrong about that, by the way. Jupiter's coming out into Pakistan. It looks like Pakistan is actually going to resolve its problems. And we have Mercury, Sun, and Moon passing through China and India, and those governments will have some problems as well. So there'll be some political scandals connected there, and also some scandals in the Philippines, Australia, and possibly in Japan. It's interesting in that New Zealand is being hit pretty strongly by COVID right now, as I understand it, and they've been largely untouched by the crisis for the past couple of years, but basically they've been letting more and more people in, and that tends to cause problems. It isn't that they shouldn't be letting people in; it's just that if you've been isolated, there's going to be no familiarity with the disease. So I'm not even talking about natural immunity. So let's look at the now chart quickly. And let's say New Bedford again is the center. Not because New Bedford is so important, but because it's where I am. All right, so right now, as I'm talking, we have, and I'm going to stop the share, make sure this goes on. So we have the moon is in Taurus, which is a good location. It just entered that sign this morning. And actually, it's funny. Yesterday, I felt like the moon was ruled Rahu, even though I wasn't looking at the charts. Yeah, it was just that kind of a day. It was just really, really upsetting kind of a day. Moon's in Taurus still gives some economic benefit to people, and also the yogi points in the first house. So economically, it looks like a pretty good week. Ketu's in the fourth house, and Mars and Saturn are in the seventh house. So relationship life will be strained for a lot of people this week. just in general. I'll talk about specific signs in a second. Venus and Jupiter in the eighth house, that looks okay. I think whenever you see benefic planets in the eighth house, it's always this worry that good things won't happen, but actually it'll give good benefits to the spouse. And Sun and Mercury are in conjunction almost right on top of each other in Pisces, and that particular combination is good for communications, but again, confused communications at best. Rahu's in the ninth house, so there'll be, like I said, some conflicts or some misunderstandings or dissatisfaction with leadership. And like I said, that isn't just in the United States. This is all around the world. It's not just us, folks. It looks like nobody's really happy with their leaders. Okay, so basically, and Saturn's aspecting the sun, so there's a lot of responsibility. Now, again, within about another week or so, another 10 days or so, excuse me, Sun goes into Aries. That's its exaltation sign, but that'll also mean that people are going to be criticizing the highest levels of government, not just mayors or governors, but presidents. And you may see, in fact, in certain countries, efforts to overthrow or efforts to subvert governments. So this is going to be a really interesting month. And I'm not particularly looking forward to this, but there's a lot of dissatisfaction. And I also think you'll see a couple of military coups around the world, if I'm quite honest. So let's look at the map. Okay, so if we're looking at the map, there's a Sun-Mercury conjunction in Massachusetts and down into Haiti and the Dominican Republic and down through Guyana, I'm sorry, not Guyana, Colombia, Venezuela, Argentina. So you can expect some governmental problems there. This kind of affects the entire East Coast in the United States. Jupiter is fairly well placed over Louisiana and Michigan, so that indicates this part of the world isn't doing too bad, although Jupiter is relatively advanced degree, so it's not really strong. And Venus, Saturn, Mars, so some economic stress on the west coast of the United States, in the western states, like from Nevada through California, and also some economic pressure and dissatisfaction with the government in Hawaii. The moon is really not intersecting with anything right now except for Alaska, so that's really not a bad point, although it can indicate some flooding over here. And we have a Rahu moon conjunction right over close to the Azores. There is some fear about volcanic eruption in the Azores. I think we're going to see something like that happening in a couple of weeks. And so I would say the most dangerous time for the Azores are between now and roughly April 12th. April 6th is a particularly dangerous time because that's when the Saturn-Mars conjunction will become exact. There's a Jupiter line passing through Ireland, Spain, and this tends to give more attention to the rule of law and to legal precedents. And we have a Sun-Mercury line running through close to Turkey and through Eastern Europe. So again, this means government communications will be scrambled, and it won't be a particularly good time for governments in any of those countries. there's not much happening except for this Saturn-Mars line in Ukraine. So essentially that just means suffering. That's essentially the status they've been in for a while, I'm afraid. And over here we have the moon passing over Pakistan and Afghanistan. So that will indicate a change in government, and they are considering that. And finally, you have Rahu moon line passing over close to Pakistan and close to India and China. So all three countries are really concerned about the potential for a change in government. Jupiter's passing over China, essentially what's the Tibetan part of China right here. And also we have a Sun Mercury sign over here. So essentially there'll be confused signals from the Chinese government. But one thing I did want to mention is a Rahu moon combination passing over Russia. Russia is starting to get worried about the long-term impact of what's going on. So I'm not sure. I mean, they may try to back out of the war in at the end of the month. Although I'm not really sure about that. That's more speculation. There's some optimism in April 30th because of Saturn's change of signs, but I don't know. I just think Russia's very stubborn. But like I said, I hope I'm wrong. Some governmental scandal in Australia, and let me just see over here, and also in New Guinea, and also in Japan. Okay, so that's it around the world. And let's go back to stop the share and then start up again. So we're going to look at the charts. Oops. Oh, keep closing the wrong window. I'm sorry, folks. Okay, that's the window we want. So for Aries has some dissatisfaction or disaffection with relationship partner. Relationship partners just seem to care that much. That'll keep on going over the next year or so. There will be a temptation for this sign to be dishonest. Moon is in, or dissatisfied. Moon is in the second house. That's good for financial gains for the sign over the next week. Third house lord is in the 11th. So again, kind of untrustworthy friends. But overall, career-wise, it looks good, although there may be some conflicts in career. And in terms of financial gain, the week ahead looks pretty good for Aries. So we have good combinations for wealth. For Taurus, so this sign will be particularly good looking, and particularly, let me just see, where did my face go? My face, go on the picture. Let's share it. All right, I'm okay. So for Taurus, good looking, attractive. Difficult life though for the sign this week. A lot of disagreements with relationship partners. This seems to be a common strand from this chart, and also, at least from the chart, some minor miscommunications at work. But work life will actually be pretty good for the sign. They'll feel pretty comfortable on the job. For Gemini, essentially, the Lord of the First is in the 10th, so they'll seem to be really scattered work-wise. They'll seem to be really, really confused work-wise. A lot of confusion in home life too. and relationship life. So that'll last really until around for the next 8 days, and then they'll start to be a little bit less easygoing, more demanding, more aggressive about relationship life, and about what they want for themselves. So like I said, right now they're feeling a little confused or isolated, but they're being kept busy, so that's really not a problem. K2 in the 5th house, children will be a little bit difficult to deal with. Mars and Saturn are in the 8th house. Relationship partners will seem to be a little bit more sulky, a little bit difficult to talk with. Jupiter and Venus are in the 9th house. Good for career luck, good for career advancement. Overall, not a bad week. For Cancer, Cancer has that Saturn Moon conjunction. This is going to be Cancer and Capricorn are going to have the toughest week relationship-wise. Cancer more so than any other sign, I think, and Leo as well. But Cancer is going to have a lot of anger, a lot of frustration with relationship life. Jupiter and Venus, relationship partner will seem to be sweet, attentive, but basically a little bit angry, a little bit sulky. So those contradictions tend to work well. So the relationship partner will be very, very moody over the next week. Sun is in the 9th house, so it should be a good week for money. Moon is in the 11th house, good for financial gains, and there'll be a lot of focus on money for this chart. And overall, K2, more focus, more obsession with career for this sign than on home life. For Leo, Leo has the sun in the 8th house, so it's a little bit, its confidence is a little lacking. It feels like it can't express itself fully. But Venus and Jupiter are aspecting the 1st house, so that's good. That's a good combination. Saturn and Mars are in the 12th house, are in the 6th house, so the sign will be very competitive this week, but really not able to express itself. And Moon, career life will be very strong for this planet this week, so that's good. But they won't get a lot of help or a lot of support from people. For Virgo, Virgo has Sun and Mercury in the 7th house, so there's confusion over what the person wants in relationships. And relationships will be a strong focus. Relationship partners will seem difficult to please or a little bit testy. Moon is in the 9th house, so that's good for overall luck. So the overall luck of the sign will be good, at least for the next week. But it'll be changing. And at least from the chart, that Mars-Saturn conjunction in the 5th house, some difficulty with children, some judgmental relationships. And Jupiter and Venus in the 6th house, enemies are soft or weak or a little difficult. But again, it tampers down the competitive nature of the sign, so you have to be careful to keep your eye on what you want. For Libra, Libra has K2 in the 1st house, so again, there's a little confusion about goals. It tends to scatter. K2 in the 1st house tends to scatter goals or make the sign less conscious of materialistic goals. And it'll also affect commerce to a certain extent. So just in general, because it's the sign that rules commerce. And it'll also affect relationships. So people will be saying to other partners, well, if you don't want to stay in the relationship, you can get out. It's sort of like a cold-hearted combination of K2s, but if K2s in Libra, the person feels rightly or wrongly, they can function by themselves perfectly well, and they don't need a relationship partner. Rahu in the 7th house is dissatisfaction in relationship life. Moon is in the 8th. Career life will tend to be behind the scenes. And Sun's in the 6th house, so this is actually pretty good for competitive spirit. Venus and Jupiter in the 5th. Actually, it's a lucky combination. Good for love affairs, but not for long-term relationships, unfortunately. Yeah, but people will be wanting to do the right thing in terms of their long-term relationships. So even though this combination between K2 and Rahu tests the ties of a relationship, that Jupiter Venus will essentially keep people together. It won't last long, so just keep that in mind. It's going to change in about a month or so, or actually less than that, more like around, yeah, about a month or so. And let me just go back here. And Saturn's in the fourth house. So again, some tedium or some unhappiness in home life tends to show. And but also a lot of will to get what one wants. For Scorpio, Scorpio's Lord is in the third house. It's with Saturn. It gives patience and calculation. That's a good combination for achieving goals, especially after the sixth. Venus and Jupiter are in the fourth house, a relatively pleasant period for them home-wise. Sun and Mercury are in the fifth house. This will give some problems connected with children. I think one of the interesting things I'm seeing is that there's more evidence coming up about Joe Biden's son, or that's starting to like sneak through major papers. I'm not portraying a bias when I say this, but this is something which will probably cause some problems for about at least another couple of months. And it may not be a long-term problem, but it'll cause some problems for another couple of months. And Saturn aspects the fifth house in this chart, so chances are it'll be around a bit longer. The moon is in the seventh house, so good time for relationship life for this sign, but not really good for romantic involvements. Good for commerce in general for Scorpio. Sagittarius has Jupiter in the third house, so again, that politeness is very strong with this sign. This sign will seem to be very wise or very gifted. Saturn and Mars are in the second house, but it'll be harsh in speech. Sun and Mercury are in the fourth house, so there'll be some dissatisfaction with relationship life. And I know this has been sort of like sort of like a theme over the past few weeks, but believe me, it's what the stars are saying. It's not what I'm saying or what the planets are saying. And Rahu is in the fifth house, so some dissatisfaction with children from this chart. K2's in the 11th house, so again, watch your friendships. And that's true of the United States chart because they have the United States chart as being a Sagittarius rising chart. Capricorn, Saturn and Mars, two really strong malefics in one of their strongest signs. So Saturn doesn't get stronger than this unless it's in Libra or Aquarius, which will be next year for a long time. And Mars never gets any stronger than this. Mars is almost exactly at its exaltation degree. Okay, so this is really a powerful conjunction. I wouldn't recommend any Capricorns trying to communicate. It's good for rulership. It's good for essentially for people making decisions about whether or not to fire somebody or get out of a situation. That's fine. Or if a person has to fight back, it's fine for that. But for most other conditions, it can just make people seem like really testy and really irritable. So it's a really powerful combination. It's a combination of the 11th and the second Lord in the first house, so that makes it a wealth-producing combination. So that's fine. So if people are willing to work hard, they'll get a lot of money. Jupiter and Venus are in the second house. Sun and Mercury in the third house. That's good for short-term trips. And Moon is in the fifth house, so some potential for short-term love affairs or romantic involvements. K2's in the 10th house, so no matter what the person does, it'll be perceived as being wrong or not valuable. Jupiter and Venus are in the first house for Aquarius. This is a good combination. Jupiter rules the houses of money in the chart, and it's combined with the house of luck, so it's a classic Raj Yoga and Dana Yoga. So it's good for luck and good for money. And the only thing that's a little bit flawed is that Mercury, who's the lord of one of the fifth house, which is one of the houses connected with luck, is debilitated in the second house. So this indicates to me money coming in through your own efforts or through family members. And overall, good money luck, but be careful how you spend it, because Mercury in the third is going to make us a little bit more free spending. And also be careful what you say. Don't do anything. It's not necessarily a matter of don't do anything to irritate people, but just be a little bit sensitive about people's feelings. Moon is in the fourth. That's a good combination. And for domestic bliss, K2's in the ninth, so bosses are going to be a little bit picky. Finally, last but not least, we're back to Pisces. And the lord of the first house, the lord of the sixth house is in the first house, and the lord of the fourth house is in the first house and seventh house, and it's in the first house, but debilitated, it's weak. And this will give some relationship problems overall to this sign this particular week. Moon is in Taurus. This sign will be very self-effacing, very modest. It'll also be more interested in traveling. And let me just, the Mars-Saturn conjunction is in the 11th house with aspects of first, and that'll make this sign feel a little bit of pressure on it. Mars aspects the second house, so it'll seem like this sign is pretty angry. So again, keep in mind we have anger components showing up in the chart, not necessarily just because of me reading the houses, but because of this particular combination right here. And this is like an immovable force meeting an irresistible object. Something has to give, something has to explode. So just be cautious. That's it for this week. I love you all. I'll see you next week, and namaste.